love is stronger than mind control. We both see it's happening. We both see this is a war against our loved ones, war against our constitutions, against democracies.
Exactly.
And we need to win this. We need to fight back.
We have to. There's no option.
It's a critical component to mind control. Being made over to be clones of the person who's at the top of the pyramid. Interested in the subject because of my own cult involvement. I was recruited in 1974 into a front group of the Moonies.
Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of my podcast, Cults, Culture, and Coercion. And I am so happy to have a colleague, fellow researcher, a fascinating woman as my guest today. Alex Alvarová grew up behind the Iron Curtain, spent the last 20 years decoding the mechanics of the political cognitive manipulation empire, first inside the high-stakes European politics, later in the multicultural pressure cooker of Vancouver, British Columbia. Alex grew up in communist Czechoslovakia, learned to read Power and Propaganda the way other people read novels, spent 2 decades navigating political crises with communication as a journalist, an author, a podcaster. She's part investigator, part storyteller, part artist, former political spokesperson who now unpacks the machinery of modern propaganda in America. Her second book, a thriller, Feeding the Demons, inspired by the work of Steve Bannon, who's very much in the news these days with Epstein, and his masterful Trumpian coup in America, helped Czechs understand modern digital military brainwashing years before Americans did. And Alex, you told me that people were like poo-pooing you for years, and now that a Russian oligarch has regained power in the Czech Republic, they're going, "You were right, Alex.
Yes.
We should have listened to you, Alex."
Yes.
So let's start there. Tell us, your story and what's going on.
I was one of those canaries in the coal mines. So as you probably are, you must know the feeling.
Yeah.
In 2016, I was working as a communication advisor to the chairman of legislation committee in the European Parliament. And during that time in my country, Czech Republic, it was already 3 years of ongoing toxic information campaign. The entire information space became unbelievably toxic. There was a lot of narrative flying around about Muslims are gonna kill us all. We need to save our Jewish Christian civilization. So sorry for being that dramatic,
no, that's how we talk here on the podcast. We like to do voices.
Yeah, it was so horrible. So and at least 2014, after Russia attacked Ukraine, we didn't understand where does it come from. It came from everywhere, from social media, from newly builded podcasts and our news outlets. Right. It was like everywhere. You just couldn't open a can with anchovies without any of these narratives jumping out on you.
Right.
So I was
and that's
feeling
part of what Russia does. They're
flooding the zone,
a lot of shit against the wall, and they wait to see what sticks.
What happened?
Then they amplify that.
That's exactly what they do. Yeah. But the problem was, and I didn't know at that time, that they also have they have a huge financial capability to hire American pros, like for perception management and military grade stuff, data-driven campaigns. We didn't know at that time. We just felt that something is coming upon us. Right. So and it's dangerous. And this is how it started in our country. The polarization and the moment when we started to see the enemy in each other's neighbor, in my mother-in-law, in your brother, every family started to feel that we are increasingly falling down through different rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And feeling like, and we didn't share the same information space anymore. And I felt scared. So that
Sure.
was probably the reason why I said yes when my husband got a job in Vancouver, BC. And I said,
Right.
okay, let's get out of here.
Get some air to breathe.
Get some air.
Yeah, the Russian methodology, the KGB, was demoralization, like try
Yes.
to infiltrate into societies in the left wing and the right wing and just stir up a lot of critics of experts and science and democratic institutions, just raising anxiety, fear,
Exactly.
disgust, distrust,
Yeah.
because it sets people up emotionally to
Yeah.
want someone. This is too much. We just want to follow someone who has
someone's
the answer.
lead. Yes. And this is, and they succeeded with it totally. So look at the NATO countries. We were so proud about being part of the strongest, family of countries.
Right.
And when you see United States almost fallen, UK, huge problems after Brexit, fallen and trying to get up. So
Right.
part of Middle Europe, Slovakia, tiny country and the eastern flank of the NATO, totally fallen in Russian Trojan horse already. Orban, that's why
Hungary.
Hungary. And now our country got hit too. So they are doing it chip away piece by piece. They are just chipping away the Western safety space through cognitive means. And no one is just understanding the concept, because when you say the war, everyone imagines like, oh, there's no shooting on the streets. But it is a military grade stuff, and it's dangerous.
Right. So you use the term cognitive warfare. I call it psychological warfare, but it means the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the assault on the minds.
Yes.
It's the assault on identity and
Absolutely.
who we are and what are our values and what to believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's the way how they attract people in, because mostly when everyone keeps speaking about fake news, disinformation, but that's not the core of the problem. The core of the problem that in the modern information space, they are trying to create conditions under which the people will look for any protection, for a new identity, for safety, for responses, for who am I, who's my tribe, who shall I listen to, what are my values. And if you fall down one of these gazillions rabbit hole, so you get reconfigured, brainwashed, and you fell out down at the rabbit hole as a completely different person.
Yes, if I may add, in terms of my studies, and you're right, I'm a wounded healer. I too am a canary in the coal mine. People walk around with incorrect assumptions, like brainwashing only happens to weak, stupid people. Couldn't happen to me. They walk around thinking humans are rational, and therefore you can rationally argue. I know you're laughing, but people think we're logical, rational beings, and if you just give people the facts, they'll wake up and get out of a brainwashing situation. But the truth is we're emotional beings and we're social beings.
Yes.
And part of our brilliance as a species is we adapt to the environment and the people in our environment. And this is an unconscious adaptation, survival reaction.
Yeah.
But now we don't have a world where we're interacting with real life people as much as we're interacting in this digital artificial space. And because they are the bad actors have been gathering our data and using supercomputers and social media,
Yes.
they are manipulating minds at a massive scale.
Yes, that at scale, that's the important stuff. At
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah.
So not just you and me or our Aunt Liddy. So it's
Right.
you can hit millions and millions people by targeting when you have their psychological profiles and psychological data. You can hit their weak spots, make them scared, make them look for protection, for new tribes, for new models how to survive. And this is how it happens. In this we don't communicate after COVID. We don't use the normal information space anymore. We don't speak face to face anymore
as much as we should.
Yes.
I've been encouraging people, real life friends, real life families, don't spend so much time online with strangers
Absolutely.
seeking followers who you have
AI
no
bots.
idea. Yeah, and bots.
Bots, sorry.
I have a quick story to share. When Donald Trump, before he got the GOP nomination to run for president the first time, he made a comment, and he was always going after inflammatory comments because he knew the media would report it. And by reporting it, it was putting Trump, Trump, Trump in people's heads. Trump, Trump, Trump. So he got like $2 billion of free media. Anyway, one of his rants was, I'm going to create a total Muslim ban, when I take over. So I wrote a blog in the Huffington Post at the time. I think it was like December of 2015. And the headline was something like, ISIS's greatest recruiter, Donald Trump.
Yep.
Talking about this kind of, Islamophobic talk was going to rush a lot of Muslims to join the Islamic State. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because within a couple of hours, I had 200 vitriolic posts attacking me. And I never had 200. I had like 5 posts saying, interesting point, I agree with you, 200. But it didn't dawn on me till many months later. These were trolls.
Yeah.
These were bots.
Yeah.
These were not even
not real.
Human beings.
Hall of mirrors.
But when you're reading a thing and you're looking at the posts and there's 5 people saying good job and 200 saying this guy's this Hassan doesn't know what he's talking about and da 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 da. Yeah. It affects people because of the volume, right?
And also we got used to adjust our opinions according to our tribe. So always look over the shoulder. What are the others thinking? Am I still in line? Because they need me, I need them. I'd better not differ too much about what they think. I need to stay in line. This is a huge factor of safety. If you want to feel safe, you need to be with your tribe. So you still look, what are people saying? And at that time, no one knew it's artificial intelligence and trolls and bots.
Yeah.
So.
And very recently, Musk on X revealed location of posters, and we learned that a lot of the biggest MAGA influencers were from Nigeria and India and Pakistan and not Americans. Russia, China, etc.
The same happened to. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Please.
I'm a horrible woman. Keep talking and talking. I'm sorry.
You're not allowed to put yourself down on my podcast. Sorry.
Okay.
Please continue, Alex. We want to hear from you.
I just want to say that the same happened to me when I, for the first time, raised the question if the entire Czech information space is authentic, and that I have a suspicion that Russians are perverting it. So playing with that and trying to tweak it towards different opinions to show that the majority is elsewhere. Artificial majority, we now know.
Right.
And it really worked. At that time, the reaction was absolutely the same. Hordes of trolls. And I was called Russophobic, paranoid, crazy, cat-owned. And I spent a lot of years to try to explain to the people how it is. And I wrote books and I wrote gazillions of articles.
I want you to talk about your books, and I want you to talk about Steve Bannon, because you have done deep dive on Steve Bannon.
That was already in the time when I lived in Canada. And after my first book, which was a nonfiction called Industry of Lies, I tried to try another nonfiction, and I was fascinated. Bannon is basically my nemesis. He's like this. He's doing the same job as I did for years, but on the other side of the barricade. So, he's trying to.
He was a communications propagandist, where you were a communications PR person.
Exactly. So it's not exactly the same, but I have very close to what he's doing. I can understand how it gets done. And I spent a long months by studying his life and studying who is that man, why is he doing that, who is he working for, what were his
do tell.
What were his beginning? What kind of family, religion, and background does he come from? So who is he? Because everyone in America right now thinks, oh, he looks like a bum and he must drink a lot. But that doesn't mean he's dumb. He's one of the most intelligent people I've seen in the American information space in that job. He is clever as hell. That's the problem. And because of his look and what he's doing, and sometimes saying, people thinks he's nuts. But he knows.
Was Breitbart. Tell us about where is he coming from? Tell us, my understanding is he wants to create chaos.
I collected a lot of his lifetime points I wanted to cover in the book, but in the end, I didn't have enough, and there was a lot of theories. How I had a lot of explanation what happened in between where I didn't have enough meat. So Canadian journalist from the CBS, Laurie Very, told me, "Oh, girl, I think you should write a fiction." Write it as a thriller, as a story.
So you don't get sued, in other words.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I overcame the empty points with my speculations, what might have possibly happened. And I wrote a fictional story about him and Cambridge Analytica and the Trumpian coup. He comes from a very rigid religion family. His parents were both Catholics. That type of Catholicism which even opposes the new reforms of the Second Vatican Council. So
aligned with Opus Dei.
Yes,
and against...
that might be very close, but not exactly Opus Dei, but aligned with the modern reform and that with the modern view of Catholicism. And after John Paul II, everything what happened in the church, so it was just wrong to them. And also, he was taught as a boy that the American dream is a bullshit, and that as he is from the working family in Virginia, he has no chance to rise up and make a career because of his background, of his origin. He's Catholic, he's poor. His dad was worker at the telephone in the AT&T company, so no chance to ever have a career. But he was very bright. He was excellent. He was an excellent student, and also extremely ambitious. And already
he did do the American dream, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He already at the university, that was Virginia Tech, he already succeeded in the campaign for the president of the student parliament. And that was the first time when he used dirty campaign. He invented some dirty stuff.
Attacks on his opponents, in other words.
And then it somehow, so that was probably the moment when he learned how to break the rules and that nothing happens to the winner. And that was I think that's his major theme through his entire life. And then after he was with the army, then he came out of the Navy and went to Harvard, then some short part in the movie industry, that I was specifically interested in that part when he was a manager of a company with Brock Pierce, who is now the Bitcoin major Bitcoin guy.
Interesting.
And Brittany Kaiser from Cambridge Analytica is his manager to Brock Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
And this company with Brock Pierce was doing business with virtual currency, with a virtual currency in the gaming world.
Mm-hmm.
And it was extremely successful until the World of Warcraft company found out that they are hiring people in China to play against the American players and to earn the virtual currency, and then they sold it to American players who were too lazy or didn't have enough time to play for all the levels.
Scam, in other words.
Yeah, it was kind of scam, and that was a second important moment in his life. And then the last one was when David Bossie introduced him to Republican Party. And David Bossie is the man who is behind the 2010 Citizens United thing.
That's the Supreme Court decision to allow corporations to give black money to politicians.
Exactly. And
that
ever
corruption went off
ever
the charts
since that
there.
year, the American politics is totally like under the influence of the largest money in the world. It's basically just a game of oligarchs.
And
at that moment,
money, not just
foreign money. Yes, Saudis, Russian, etc.
Right.
Yeah. So, and Steve Bannon then was hired as a propaganda expert to a company called Cambridge Analytica. Everyone knows the story. Big data, ocean model, tweaking the psychological data into clusters and targeting people according to their weaknesses. But he was the main architect who did the flood the zone with shit and let's target the people.
Facebook.
Yes.
So, and they influenced the election. Trump would never have won in 2016 without Facebook.
You know, we had friends in Republican Party in 2016, and they were, before the primaries, they were telling us, oh, the Trump, he has no chance. It's just a buffoon from New York and the grifter. And everyone knows he's not capable to do this. And after the primaries, they were calling us like, what the hell happened? This is unbelievable. How could he? Why? And they had no idea that the targeting works already with not only with millions of American voters, but also with the people in the Republican Party. You can brainwash anyone, change the identity of anyone if you have enough time. And if you know who are you talking to?
Yeah, target the influencers.
Yes.
For sure.
So that I wrote.
I was in the Moonies, so I saw what they were doing in the 70s. They would target some politicians. They would contact peers of the politician and say, we know you're friends with so-and-so. We want to honor him. So we want to have a special dinner, for him. Can we count on you? And they would go around without the main politician even giving permission or whatever, that they're going to get an award or an honor or whatever. It was a total social engineering operation, but the goal was to get a lot of famous, powerful people in a room together, taking pictures with Moon and other people, and making introductions to do business behind the scenes.
Okay.
Using the Washington Times and using their media empire at the time in DC.
Actually reminds me the military method called networked insurgency. Then you need to know a lot of people and a lot of tribal gurus or tribal influencers.
Like in Afghanistan,
where General Flynn organized this stuff, and he was he got pardoned by Trump, right?
Oh yeah.
So
And he was at the beginning of QAnon. He was linked
exactly, and QAnon
forensically.
was the first digital psychological operation, or first digital cult.
PSYOP.
PSYOP. Yes.
It was a PSYOP. I actually did a bite model analysis of QAnon online,
Wow.
and now it's making a resurgence again.
And Steve, I think it works all together. So it's basically the cult-ish knowledge developed during the 20th century, put into the new digital and big data environment.
For
and
sure.
with the method of AI distribution, target to people according to their weaknesses, who are, they call them in Cambridge Analytica, Bannon called them persuadables. They saw in the data that there are some clusters of the population who went through some trauma, who have bad time in their lives, who are struggling with financially, or having, like, being after divorce or something, and they could target them exactly in that precious moment of their life.
And people are more vulnerable when they're having extra stressors or they're depressed or something.
Yes.
But they were also targeting people who were open to new experiences, people who are naturally curious, which is some of the brightest minds.
Yes.
You want to learn something new? Come and check this out.
Oh my God, I would almost say yes, because that's me.
I did, unfortunately, but I had no framework to evaluate whether or not this was a good decision or not, because I didn't think I was vulnerable to anything bad, because I was an extra honor student, and I came from a solid family, and I knew who I was and where I was going with my life. And that's partly when I got out of the cult, I was like, how did they do this to me?
Yeah,
but that's exactly what I've spent.
That's the point.
All this time. Yeah,
that's the point. It can happen to everyone.
Right.
People, disinformation, radicalization, tribal behavior, cults. This is all the same pool of methods. It's just people don't believe it might be done to them.
Right. And so, you know me, I've been trying to amplify the voices of ex-members, people who've come out the rabbit hole, people who bought into the radicalization and now realize it was BS, in helping them to reconstruct what were the steps, what were the propaganda videos, who were the influencers that you were trusting back then. And as a therapist, the big question I would ask them always is, once they understand things like the influence continuum and the bite model, etc., I'd say, if you could go back in time to your younger self, if you knew then what you know now, what would you say and do differently? And they'd be like, I wouldn't have clicked, or I wouldn't have gone to that meeting, or, you know, I wouldn't have thought that woman actually loved me. I would have realized she was just honeypotting me, or whatever, right? So that's part of what works, is to help people go back, realize where they got deceived, and plug in what the healthy response should have been if they understood the techniques that were being employed on them.
This is actually a knowledge which is so much needed today, because when you observe how people fall into the MAGA bubbles, or in our country, or in Slovakia, Hungary, it's everywhere the same method, same playbook. We just don't pay enough attention, because Americans don't basically care what's happening in Europe, and Europeans don't understand what's happening in America, but it's happening everywhere. Everywhere.
That's why having that 30,000-foot perspective, you know, why studying history is so important, because it gives you a framework that isn't your direct experience. But you have to also understand there are bad actors. Like when Russia invaded Crimea, first they were doing psychological warfare, making it seem like it was the Ukrainians asking for liberation.
Exactly.
You know, but the whole strategy, once they grabbed that land, yes, the America did sanctions and European Union, but that not stopping Putin then has led to what we're
Yes.
experiencing now.
Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah,
they tried it also in Canada. So first in the 70s, they tried to pretend they are separatists in Quebec. And in the modern era, there was a huge wing in Alberta which wanted to like join America.
Yeah, they're
Let's
still
do this
working on
together.
that one.
Yeah,
The oil
it's
people.
oil
Let's
people.
secede like Texas.
Yeah,
Let's secede. We don't want to be part of the United States. We can have our own country.
They call it Vexit, but thank God Canadians understood the crisis and the Stratcom way before Trump first term. And what I've seen, I was at that time in Canada. It was really interesting. There was in British Columbia, there is a military university in Victoria, BC called Royal Roads University. And one of their officers already 2016 started or wrote an essay that Canada has to redo its military doctrine, just to double it or to prepare just in case their best friend and southern neighbor would turn into authoritarian states. And they already started working on it 2016. I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
So they are really good in this stuff. And so that's why I strongly believe they will also mitigate the Alberta problem.
I hope so. I really do. I know that Trump opened this big trap saying we're going to annex Canada, and the right-wing politician who was supposed to win got trounced by Carney.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah, but Trump really helped.
Yeah, absolutely. The oil pipeline is also a money pipeline. This is how it was, how it has been created, and it's still not over. Yeah.
Right. So you have the wisdom of knowing about Europe, and a lot of my audience is in America, although I do have European listeners. Tell Americans what you think they need to know about the socio-political, historical moment of what's happening, and make recommendations, please.
I would say it went like there was a syndicate of malign actors. Sorry for my pronunciation. Some malign actors.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
Good.
It was national authoritarian states like Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, even Iran, which is strange, but they all made an agreement that they need America down the scene, away from the scene to be the world policeman.
Right.
That America was just not good, not for their plans for the future. And they started it first. Russia was actually never stopped, so they didn't start. They just never stopped because Russia. It's Russia's oldest dream to dismantle and turn America to ashes. It's like
but I
what they always wanted.
I think Putin growing up in the Soviet Union and as a KGB officer,
that's their national narrative.
But Putin personally takes glee over manipulating Trump and dangling him around.
It didn't start after 2010. Putin, as an old KGB man, must have known how KGB cultivated Trump since the 80s. So he knew all the story. He just picked Trump as the best asset they had at that time.
Yeah, and then Putin's kind of getting tired of Trump. I'm not sure if that's true, but this whole Epstein file thing.
I think he doesn't deliver as promised. when
That Trump doesn't deliver.
Trump doesn't deliver as
Yeah.
promised, because Putin wanted him to deliver Ukraine possibly as fast as possible, and
Right.
Trump is not doing it, and at least he's trying, but it's not going fast enough, and Russia is bleeding financially every
Yeah.
single day, so it's about time. And that might be the point when Putin, losing his ground, will use something what he would never use before, just to destroy his own asset and pick a new one,
Right.
to prepare the ground for a game, for the changing the game. They do it all the time. Already when they feel they start to lose, they prepare alternative games. So what if? So I think they are working on it right now. So the alternative.
But I think that there are Russian people who are actually protesting in the streets now, and a lot of people are very unhappy in Russia.
Because the economy is going down, and Ukraine is taking their major income resources, like refineries, oil refineries, every single day
refineries.
Refineries. So every single day by drone attacks. So their income.
I just saw one today on a marine drone blowing up a tanker.
That's what they do, and they are doing it with high precision. So I think every single day they have a huge damage, and Russia has basically two major incomes: raw, like oil, gold, and raw stuff. And the second income no one talks about is organized crime, because Russia is the state where organized crime has a state, not the otherwise.
Right, including trafficking.
Human trafficking. That's what the Epstein scandal involves. Right. Drugs, smuggling, money laundering. They had so many good assets around the world which laundered huge money for them. And this is their second resource of income. So the sanctions together and the damages to their oil structures, that keeps Putin under pressure, and he's already losing it. So he might be nervous right now.
Right. So tell us more. Tell us about the new person who was elected in the Czech Republic. He was an oligarch, or is an oligarch?
It's the same story like in America. He had already his first term. It's one of the richest people, allegedly richest. We don't know whose money is he guarding, but he's allegedly one of the richest men in the Czech Republic. We have a long history of pro-Russian oligarchs in our state who did the business with Russian oil, Russian gas, and Russians always give them cut. So they then they let them grow and get richer and richer in exchange for loyalty on some information space tweaking and so on. So he's one of them. He had already his first term. His name is Babiš. He was already during the first time visiting Trump, which was so interesting because this is the only one of the 2 or 3 pictures I've seen in the White House where Trump makes the lower handshake, not the upper one. When he makes the handshake, he gives to our oligarch the hand like, I'm yours.
That's interesting.
That's very unusual because Orban, Babiš, and those Eastern oligarchs, they are nobodies from the point of view of America. Who are they? Why is Orban so much invited to GOP CPACs? So 10 years ago, no one would ever consider invite some goulash baron from Middle Europe. And right now, here we are. So I think it's all about money, Russian money, and money from organized crime. This is the same playbook in Czech Republic. And the method, how they conquer our territories, is the digital propaganda, digital minor digital bubbles, cult-like bubbles, where people get radicalized, isolated, loved by trolls, and changed and reprogrammed into different human beings. This is
Right.
how it goes. And then they, when the malign work is finished, they just tell them, go and vote, or don't go.
Yeah, but
You better stay at home.
They wreck the social fabric because as people are getting
Absolutely.
radicalized, they cut
Yes.
off from mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers. You
Yes,
see
this is what happens in every family in Czech Republic right now.
estrangements, you know, whether it's gender related, whether it's political related, whether it's sexually related, etc. And also hypnosis. There's just a huge amount of hypnosis being done online under the term visualizations or meditations, but like not really explaining that they're subverting people's critical faculties and installing foreign belief systems in their heads.
Stephen, I think the hypnosis stuff is so unknown amongst the public, and
Right.
that no one really speaks about. And there were, in the radicalizing of young American incels, there was so much of this stuff.
Right.
And no one really knows. No one really writes about it.
Because a lot of people haven't studied it. When I got out of the Moonies, it was 4 years before, and I had read everything I could find on social psychology and brainwashing and persuasion and attitude change. And I was thinking to myself, there's something missing. I don't know what it is. And a friend invited me to an NLP workshop, a neuro-linguistic programming workshop.
Wow.
And I attended this, and I was like, that's how I used to talk as a Moonie. Like the way they were doing that on the stage.
Do you think they used it?
And I came to learn that Milton Erickson, who created a new form of hypnosis, which was process-based hypnosis, got modeled by two guys, Grinder and Bandler, who turned it into NLP.
Okay.
And that's what we're seeing everywhere. Tony Robbins learned it and has been teaching it, but he doesn't call it NLP. And it's conversational, it's storytelling, hypnotic inductions. It's a lot of confusion techniques and linguistic double binds techniques. So because I was fascinated to unpack how did they do this to me, and how are groups doing this to other people, I started going to workshops and learning. And then I got to the point where I realized this is unethical. What they're teaching is like blatantly evil. That you do what works. And if you're a salesman, the more money you can make, that more ethical it is. And it's like, no, not if you're lying and tricking people. No. But I wanted to learn more. And I went to the Erickson Foundation, which is what NLP was based on. And they said, we'll only teach you if you have a master's degree or higher. And that was part of my motivation to get my first master's degree, was because I really wanted to learn from the top hypnotherapists in the world, because it's a very powerful therapeutic modality if it's done ethically.
Okay.
But when I went there, they were just like thinking they could keep it to themselves as therapists, and that bad actors weren't going to learn this stuff, read the books,
this never gonna
buy
happen.
the videotapes and apply it in nefarious ways. And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So I actually contributed to 2 chapters in a textbook on clinical hypnotherapy on the dark side of hypnosis with Alan Shefflin. Alan was a law professor, friend of mine, who wrote the first book on MK And of all the MK Ultra, that was the CIA's initial research thing, LSD, electroshock, etc. Alan Dulles said the thing that worked was hypnosis. That was the secret weapon. And the movie, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, had a very crude form of hypnosis that was used where the Chinese were telling the person to shoot the friend and all that. But that's part of what that field. So anyway, Alan did a chapter on that, and I did a chapter on cults like Scientology. Hubbard was a hypnotist.
I didn't know that. Really?
Absolutely. The whole thing is based on hypnotic programming.
Oh my God.
Yes, I've gone into great detail unpacking it. You sit opposite a Scientologist with your eyes closed, just be there until they pass. And then you have to sit opposite a Scientologist and stare into their eyes until they pass you. So you're like trancing out into a cult member's space. And then they have you stare, and then the Scientologist does what's called bull baiting to try to get you out of the trance by telling you jokes or trying to distract you, but you have to keep the glare in order to pass that. So they're training people to be good Scientologists. So anyway, it goes on from there.
This is horrible. And that explains a lot how the cult methods and the modern propaganda intertwine.
So the key thing to understand is that hypnotic trance states is actually a part of the human experience, and people who are very successful sports people, musicians, artists, writers, you go into a zone.
It's even called that, going to the zone.
It's a concentration. It's an absorption where you're not paying attention to anything else. So, but it's a superpower. But when you're in that space, your critical faculties are offline. So if you're in that space and somebody has an agenda to make you into a Republican or make you into a Democrat or make you into an atheist, or make you into a believer in Jesus, it's very easy to start installing beliefs and even memories of things that never happened, but you believe that it happened to you.
It's so hard to imagine it to someone who never heard about these methods, and so hard to believe to the order. I see myself 10 years ago when I started to explain to my fellow citizens that the Russians are playing with their brains at scale. And yet it was true. And why should we suspect that they don't use these influence methods when the information space offers them for sale at a silver plate? The entire Silicon Valley has been built on selling to anyone, selling the product, to connectivity, the psychological evaluation to anyone who pays. So America put the method on sale, and Russia was just
Edward Bernays
doing the stuffing.
Well, people also are copycats. They see what works that's different than what they're doing, and they're like, how is that working? The Russians were very good at what was called direct suggestion, which was using authority, using certainty to give commands. And there's a bell-shaped curve. And with people with an authority figure they perceive to be legitimate, if they're given commands by their doctor or by their therapist, there's a big normative group that will respond. Those people were called hypnotizable. The ones who wouldn't comply, those were non-hypnotizable by that model. What Erickson did and what NLP is based on is the idea that people are going in and out of trance states all day long. If you pay attention, if you learn to train your reading faces, etc., dilation of pupils, etc., and you never do a direct suggestion because the person could say no. So you say things like, open-ended, I wonder if you're beginning to become aware that there's a certain idea that's starting to surface in your unconscious because you can't say no.
Yeah. There is
You
no
know?
way to say no.
And the operator is saying these suggestions, watching for your reactions, and they can tell when they found
the
a
weak
hook,
spot.
right? And that's where they can start diving further in and amplifying, etc. But it's very, very tricky technique, because if you're highly skilled, doing it on someone who knows nothing about it, the person who knows nothing about it has no defenses.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why the Cambridge Analytica with Steve Bannon was looking for the sort of people they called persuadables, because they filtrate that there was some kind of, to sway the election, you just need a very small amount of people, let's say in swing states or in regions where people still hesitate. And when you found those people who are easy to influence, and you got just the right amount.
So it's known as complex systems science. It's looking at a network, but you're messaging to large numbers of people, and you're looking for incremental shifts. You're not, when you see persuadables, it's not like, no, I don't want to buy this timeshare and I'll buy the timeshare in 1 hour. There are those people who can be persuaded in 1 hour, but when we're talking about what's happening online, it's much more
nefarious,
nuanced, and harder to identify. And now we're entering into an age of AI and supercomputers, where they now have AI that can create lifelike visuals of people doing things and saying things they've never said. And you can't tell that it's not real.
There is one more thing. I think it's more dangerous than creating fake videos. And this is in the tests, the AI scores in persuasion way higher than humans. They have the AI bots and the agents have way better score how to influence a person in a certain amount of time. And they outperform humans. So they are actually masterful manipulators. They know how to talk with. So the language models are basically very good at persuading people on anything, just if you get enough time and enough contact. And people think, oh, I'm talking only with ChatGPT. It could be my friend. It's only a machine, right?
Right. No, it's a lot of data collection at super high levels, and what do I want to say publicly? What I want to say is that capturing people's motivations, either moving towards a positive or away from a negative. Some of the most powerful persuaders do both at the same time. But I guess what I'm trying to convey is that unless people unplug and don't spend 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 hours on their phone, if people don't stop turning off their phone an hour to 2 hours before they go to sleep, and make sure they're sleeping 7 to 9 hours. Most people are sleep deprived because of the workaholism piece. Unless people spend more time in real life and understand intellectually, this is not normal.
Totally
Humans
agree.
have never been in a digital space like this, that we are in World War III. It's psychological warfare. Yes, there's kinetic warfare 100%. In Ukraine, but it's psychological warfare. And that's why I call my company Freedom of Mind. I say it's your mind and you should control it. Don't let anyone else control it.
This is what they took away from us. It's not already. It's not our freedom of decision anymore. We don't possess this freedom of decision anymore.
Well,
They
we
just
do.
tweak our minds.
No, we do, but the key thing is realizing it. And usually it's family and friends who
Yeah.
notice someone getting radicalized and
Yes.
say, wait a minute, you were a
There's
vegetarian, now you're eating steak, or you were eating steak
Mhm.
and now you're only a vegetarian. What happened?
Uh-huh.
And taking the time. Did you watch a video? Are you going to online groups? Because if
Or
they can start changing your behaviors, then they can influence your beliefs and your emotions.
Yeah.
And by controlling information, people can be led into rabbit holes.
Yeah.
So we need what I call trust pods, people that know us, who care about us, who don't have an agenda to
Who just love
make
us
yeah, just love us
unconditionally. Yeah.
unconditionally and just say, you know, we're living in a strange digital psychological warfare world, and we got to lean on people that we trust.
Yeah.
And this is
Absolutely.
where we need to go back to mental health professionals who are trustworthy, that were censored by the mainstream media in the United States, people who are experts in vaccinations and medicine and science and genetics and space,
This is
etc.
why it's so much distortion in it to the information authority of scientists, therapists, and people. So they don't want you to be there. So to be in it,
Exactly.
to have the authority to speak to people.
Exactly.
No,
Well,
so
if
they
you're a
are
creationist,
erasing it.
right? If you're a Christian nationalist that is teaching that the Earth is 6,000 years old, you don't want an anthropologist and an archaeologist to say
Any near
the
you.
Earth is 4.6 billion years old. And likewise, if you're a fossil fuel country or corporation, you don't want people to listen to the 97% of all the climate scientists showing the proof, the scientific data that we're warming the planet by our human activity, and it's going to be catastrophic.
Yeah.
You know, so we need experts. And we need to find, and when people say, what do you recommend, Steve? I say, I don't listen to any strangers that I see on social media. I want to know people who have the credibility, the integrity, the academic credentials, the experiential credentials, and who show over time they're trustworthy. And that if they make a mistake, they apologize and say, oops, I got it wrong, and admit it. And be careful, because people with certainty are the ones you want to be really careful of, because real scientists are always
they always admit they are not 100% sure.
Yeah,
they always, because the method. We're humans.
We're flawed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but that's how you can have the sniff test. That they're grounded in reality, and if they change their mind or scientific data comes in, they go, oops, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And cult leaders never admit
they're wrong.
Blame everyone else, distract, project.
This is how the modern populist politicians work, as a cult leaders. So never admit their mistake. This is how Trump works.
Yes, I wrote a book on it.
Yeah,
I'm going to plug it. Yes, I wrote a book on it. Read the book.
Yes, read the
book. I actually got it right. If I could, I would update it, and I would add the Mormons, and I would add the Moonies and Scientology, and a lot more cults that I've uncovered. I didn't know Ann Nelson's work about the Council for National Policy, the private billionaire think tank that was orchestrating a lot of this over 40 plus years. I would update the book, but Simon & Schuster didn't want an update book. So we just did a short forward from George Conway before the last election saying the GOP is basically a cult now. And my afterward But stay tuned, people, because MAGA is starting to dissolve.
Yeah, that's important.
And
we are
I
seeing
keep
already cracks in their beliefs
and I
in
keep
their
telling
unity.
people, reach out to family and friends and don't attack them and don't try to argue and just be warm and just say, what do you think's what's going on?
Yeah.
You know,
This is what I try when I have my lectures in Czech Republic, and people always keep asking me, what are we going to do? Our relatives and loved ones are already lost, and we are still fighting at home because they elected our oligarch. And I always keep using your method, and I'm telling them, there is a scientist in America, Stephen Hassan, expert on cults, and he recommends don't exclude these people from your life. They've been reprogrammed. It's not their fault.
And
it could eventually happen to you. So just be kind. Don't attack them. Don't attack their gurus, their beliefs, their favorite politicians. Don't attack. Just ask questions, polite, neutral questions. That's it. You don't and don't even oppose their answers. Just ask questions, eat with them, make groceries with them, spend as much time as you could with them, because they got them at the time when they felt alone, isolated, or just
perhaps
a little bit confused or something.
Right, but the key is face-saving exits. That you're not going to wag a finger in their face and say, why didn't you listen to us? You're going to be like, let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's start a new chapter.
Yeah.
You're my family. I want you in my life.
That's
talk.
What matters, right? You
Love
want these people.
Love is stronger than mind control.
Absolutely.
Love is stronger than fear, even.
Yes.
And courage is contagious. I love what Mark Kelly said when he was talking to the military, saying, we have an oath to the Constitution, and we're sworn not to follow illegal orders.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump was like, you're going to be executed for BR treason. And he's like, nope, that's not how we're trained as the military. You never were in the military, so you don't understand.
Yeah. So love is
you
stronger than might.
Alex.
I use your words. Love is stronger than mind control. We both see it's happening. We both see this is a war against our loved ones, war against our cohesion, against our coordination, against our constitutions, against democracies. And we need to win this. We need to fight back.
We have to. There's no option.
There's
not
no
an option. We need to have hope. And we need to remember there's more of us than them. And our biggest resource is our people. We have a lot of smart people. We just need to educate them on what the actual danger is, who are the predators, explain the tactics that are being deployed, and come up with countermeasures.
Yeah. Let's talk, let's learn, let's connect.
Great. Thank you so much. And let's stay in touch.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. It was awesome.
My pleasure. Take care.
Take care.